If you've been wondering what you can do to help build resilience in your children, then tune in to today's episode. Dr. Larry Palevsky, New York State licensed pediatrician, shares with us decades of experience on what he has found to be at the foundation of healthy, resilient children. We dive into perspectives on parenting, what a child is really seeking when they ask you questions, and what it means to view the world through the eyes of a child. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show as we continue on with our series on trauma recovery from surviving to thriving. And today we've got Dr. Larry Palevsky back with us. We interviewed Dr. Palevsky about 3 months back, so you can check out that episode. I talk about that a little bit in the beginning of my intro with him. But today we bring him back specifically to talk about children. So Dr. Palevsky is a pediatrician, runs a big holistic practice. And I wanted to get his feedback around trauma resilience in children. So I asked him specifically around how do we build physical, mental, emotional resilience in our kids? Basically, why do some people become traumatized and others don't when they have different experiences that happen in life? And is there anything that we can do to try to build as much resilience as possible so that our kids don't become traumatized quite so easily? And we had a big discussion on all of this. My wife, Taya, joins me in this episode as well. So we get into a lot of different pieces. He breaks down the importance of what he calls spiritual resilience. And we're going to look at that and break that down in many different pieces. We get into lots of different aspects of parenting. So we talk about the pendulum swing and how we've moved from one extreme of parenting to another, and where we really need to be to support our children and actually parent our kids as best as possible. We get into the importance of why it's so important to let our kids struggle sometimes, and what happens when they do struggle and what they learn coming out the other side, and how that plays a role in resilience. There's a whole nother concept around something called object permanence and why this is so important to understand, especially at the very beginning parts of being a parent when we have newborns, and some strategies that we can look at when we are working with our kids. So this is a really fascinating episode. Dr. Palevsky is a wealth of information. So I hope you enjoy this episode and as we continue on with this series on trauma recovery. Now, I want to field a couple of questions before we jump into the episode. I've had a couple of questions specifically around C60 that I wanted to bring awareness to. So number one was, can you use C60 for your pets? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. I've actually got several patients that have asked me that same question in clinic, and they are using C60 for their pets right now. So whether that is for anything from just overall health maintenance to decreasing risk for things like cancers or cardiovascular disease or for macular degeneration, whatever it might be. Got to remember, C60 or carbon 60 is that incredibly powerful antioxidant. And so because it works on such foundational levels of health, addressing things like oxidative load on the body and inflammation, you can use it for so many different things. And it has a myriad of different health benefits, not only for ourselves, but also for our pets. Now, one of the other things that I was asked is, are there any specific side effects that people might experience when they have C60? Now, personally, I haven't come across any side effects for the most part. I've got one patient I'll talk about in just a moment here, and how they had to modify their dose. Everybody that I've seen use it so far has just had benefits from it. I haven't seen anybody have any negative effects. And even the dosage, they tend to be fine. Personally, I take 1 teaspoon a day. That works great for me. And then I add a little bit to my actual face topically. And most people I find are fine at 1 teaspoon a day. It's not a problem for them. Now, there are some people that have long-standing health problems, such as if they were recovering from something like Lyme disease or mold toxicity, or if they have a significant methylation imbalances or very high oxidative load. And these people often need something like C60 to help to mitigate some of the inflammation and oxidative stress that they're under. But sometimes, like I find not just with C60, with almost all supplements, they have to start very slow. It's almost like they go into either a healing crisis very quickly, or they take something that just seems to overload their system in other ways. So they need to really start slow. So I've got one patient where we had to start them down as low as 1/8 of a teaspoon. And that seems to be a good dose for him at this point in time. And then we will just slowly, progressively move it up as they get more and more benefits and they tolerate that dose better, and then they can move a little bit higher. But there's no need to go higher than what your body can tolerate. Everybody's going to have different thresholds for this. We see this with something as simple as vitamin C. When people do a vitamin C challenge to see what's their bowel tolerance level for vitamin C, you literally take like 1,000 milligrams or more every hour until you get loose stools. Some people can go way up to like 50 grams before they get it. Other people might hit that benchmark at like 4 or 5 grams. So it depends on what the individual body requires. Every single person is individual, and there's no single dosage for everybody. You really have to kind of measure different things and really pay attention to the body and listen in to see what's going to work best for you. So I hope those questions help. If you've got any other questions, write in and let me know, and I will do my best to answer them as best as I can. If you'd like to try C60, then just click the link below and that will take you to the website, and use the promo code Dr. Loken, all in capitals. So that's capital DRLOKEN, and you'll get 15% off your order. You can also get the same link if you go to my website at inspirehealthpodcast.com and click the top right corner where you'll see 15% off powerful antioxidant support. Click that, that'll take you to the site, and then use the same promo code to get 15% off your order. Okay, everybody, enjoy the episode, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast as we continue on with our series on trauma recovery. And today we are bringing back a favorite guest that we've had, Dr. Larry Palevsky. And if you haven't checked out Dr. Larry Palevsky's episode, we talked to him back on episode 86 called Critical Thinking, Insights and Concerns with Dr. Larry Palevsky. So go check that on the Inspire Health podcast. That'll go through all of the details around who Dr. Palevsky is as well. And that was a really well-received episode. Lots of great information that.
And we had to actually embed that on the website.
We're making sure that that doesn't go anywhere. So it's right on the website. So you can see that at the inspirehealthpodcast.com. But check it out, episode 86. So part of our conversation is so Dr. Palevsky is a New York State licensed pediatrician. He's got a big holistic practice that he's been working with kids for decades, and absolute wealth of information. So we had a really interesting conversation around kids for part of that original episode. So I really wanted to bring him back and get his perspective around trauma and particularly building resilience. So Dr. Palevsky, welcome back to the show. So great to have you. Maybe just introduce yourself a little bit for people so they get a gist of who you are if they're not familiar.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me back. And Taya, it's good to meet you. Thanks
Likewise.
for inviting me. I'm a New York State licensed pediatrician, as you said, and I graduated NYU School of Medicine in 1987. And I was born and raised in New York. I've lived in New York almost my entire life, save for a year here and there. And I did a regular pediatric residency. I worked for better part of 10 years in pediatric emergency rooms and intensive care units and neonatal intensive care units, inpatient pediatric wards, clinics, going to high-risk deliveries. And I taught medical students and residents. And the one thing that I enjoy is what my medical school taught me to do. So one of the funny things that I say to people when they see that I'm now more holistic and I use critical thinking and I go against the mainstream, which I don't believe I do. I don't go against the mainstream. I'm going towards something new and exciting. I say, don't blame me, blame my medical school education. They actually instilled into us critical thinking. This was back in 1983 when I started. Take a journal article, read the abstract, read the methods, read the results, read the conclusions, read the discussion, pick it apart. Are they being honest? Are they saying what's really true? Where are the faults? What's missing? What are other questions that need to be asked? Et cetera, et cetera. This is what I was taught to do. Now, all of a sudden, here we are in 2021, and the idea of asking a question is more or less, a felony. You're committing a crime. And Nobody's going to stop me from asking a question, and nobody's going to stop me from asking people to ask questions. And so my interest, my dream is to be around people who ask questions, who are willing to look at things that they don't know, who are willing to abide by the motto, I don't know what I don't know. And I've come from a place in my life of being certain and sure and knowing to a place of not so certain, not so sure, and not so knowing. So I'll give information that sounds like I know what I'm talking about because I've been around for 6 decades. So obviously I have experience. But ultimately, I think a new consciousness and a new place of growth for our entire world is the ability to look at things that we didn't know, weren't certain about, weren't sure about, and say, that's interesting. I want to know more. And so the curiosity that is so embedded in the life of a child is something that we forget is still part of us. And, there is that expression, curiosity killed the cat, but there is a way to be curious and still be very healthy and grow and be very strong. So that's really where my focus is to not be around people who are just so certain, and who are so certain because someone else said something that fed them that they're now certain about, having no ownership of what it is that they think they're certain about. I don't have time for that. I don't really, I don't have, there's no growth there. And I want to be in the environment where we can grow and learn and really better ourselves.
Yeah, I love it. And that's definitely the part of the world that we were wanting to create as well. And I love that you said that going towards something new and exciting rather than away from something. And I feel like that's where we are right now. And part of that is actively being co-participants in creating something new. And this is going to be an exciting conversation. I know prior to us starting the actual interview here, we had some chats about stuff, and I'm really excited for where we're going to go here, because this does segue. It might not be directly about trauma and what you've heard from some of the other episodes, but I feel like this is such foundational stuff to help build resilience for our kids and for ourselves. So where I would like to go with this conversation, ultimately, wherever we go, I'm totally open with. I think this is all going to be really valuable for people. And originally, I would say I wanted to talk about the concept of physical, mental, emotional resilience, what that even means, how that physical, mental, and emotional resilience has been compromised in a lot of ways. Because I do feel like inherently a human species is very resilient and very adaptable, but I feel like in a lot of ways too, there's things that can move that off the tracks kind of. And I want to know what some of those things are. And then how do we get it back on? What's required to start to move back in that direction and building this strong foundation for resilience? So Larry, wherever you want to go, you take it, start it up, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay. So here's where I'd like to start. I'd like to take physical, mental, emotional resilience and add spiritual resilience. Because I think that's where it really starts. And that's true for us, but it's especially true for children. And, when you talk about trauma, well, we know what trauma does to your resilience. It definitely punches it. And, most of the trauma we talk about is physical trauma, whether it's abuse or even neglect, not being touched, not being held. But, then we see a lot of emotional trauma where there's manipulation, there's narcissistic behaviors, there's, just verbal abuse that creates the emotional abuse. The mental abuse as well, just that constant, badgering or criticizing or putting down. But I think there's, so there's rape and there's physical abuse, the sexual abuse, there's all of that, and the neglect. But I'd like to steer away from that for a second, because there's plenty of people who talk about it. I could talk about it, but there's a piece that I'd like to speak to, which is the spiritual resilience. And I think it starts from when a baby is born. Because when a baby is born, we essentially, as parents, have to lie to the babies. We have to tell them that as parents, we're going to be everything they ever needed. And we're going to provide everything that's ever going to be needed in their lives. And that's especially true for the mother, who's either nursing or feeding, because she is in there and doing everything. And that's true. The baby, when a human baby is born, baby is practically helpless and quite unable to do anything on his or her own. Whereas in many mammals, neurological development happens outside the womb, inside the womb. In humans, the predominant development of the neurological system happens outside the womb. So we have to lie to this helpless child that we're going to do everything for them. And so when a baby is born, their primitive, almost reptilian brain is one of reflexes and poor tone and lots of shaking and rooting and sucking and crying, because the essential chemistry of the newborn baby is I want equals I get or I die. And parents know that. It's in the physiology. It is in the reptilian brain, the adrenaline rush of a newborn baby who's predominantly in a hindbrain dominance, which is I need it now, I have to get it. If I don't get it, I'll die. Mm-hmm. And so essentially, babies start out with I want equals I get or I die. And parents knowing that, because they can't feed themselves, they can't clean themselves, they can't move around, and they don't know you're there if you're not there, because they don't have any sense of what's called object permanence. And so we know, you guys know, that if one of you is not in the same room and you don't see, smell, taste, hear, or touch each other, you still know that the other one exists in life. That's object permanence. Babies are not born with that. So that primitive brain needs everything. It needs to see, it needs to smell, it needs to hear, it needs to touch, and it needs to taste. And those are very, very, very sensitive senses when babies are born. And we, as the parents, respond accordingly. We understand you want, and if you don't get, you'll die. Now, whether it's getting touched or getting fed or getting loved or getting bathed or getting held, you will die, essentially. Or you will be traumatized or crippled. But if we fast forward to the adult brain does not hopefully live predominantly in hindbrain. The adult brain hopefully predominantly lives in the forebrain, which is the brain of thought and reason and consciousness and awareness and reason and analysis and explanations and conclusions and comprehension and understanding and focus and paying attention. And so that brain operates in a very different chemistry, which is I want equals I don't always get equals I'm okay. Life is still good. I won't die. Let me figure out something else. What are my options? Right? That's a higher brain. In the spiritual sense, that's the higher consciousness. And so we as parents have to bring kids from that primitive brain chemistry. I want equal I get or I die. to a chemistry of I want, I don't always get, I'll do my best, life is still good, I won't die, I'm okay, maybe I have options. What else can I do? And so you will build resilience, spiritual resilience in your children if you learn to stop the lie. And the lie is, I'll be everything. And then you have to let them know that you won't. And believe it or not, and I know this is going to sound a little bit scary to a lot of mothers, it really needs to start as close to 6 months as possible. Because at 6 months is when the baby really starts to move into the world. At 3 months, they're noticing the world a lot more. But at 6 months, the world is now the physical world. And the kid wants to touch whatever the kid can get their hands on. They want to put it in their mouth. They want to bang it. They want to transfer it to the other hand. They want to look at it. They want to examine it, right? So now you're seeing the child truly, I want, on the physical level, in the world. Not just being fed and held and touched and sung to and fed. But now it's, I want to experience the world. And as a parent, it's your job to start saying, yeah, I know you want that, but I can't let you have that. Or I know you want that, I'm not going to give it to you. And so it's really at 6 months where the parent has to stop the lie. Because and then, especially when the kid starts to crawl between hopefully 6 and 9 months, then the kid is really going to get into things. And I want, right? The I want becomes stronger and stronger. And the learning of life, which is, no, I'm not going to give that to you. No, I don't want you over there. Yeah, I don't want you playing with that outlet. I don't want you to pull that cord down, right? I don't want you to put that in your mouth. And so those are the first stages of actually undoing the lie. No, you're not going to get everything you want. No, I'm not going to give you everything you want. And, you know, maybe I won't be around for a couple hours and someone else will have to care for you because I won't be and can't be everything you'll ever need. And I tell you, I would guess to say that as a mother, you know what that feels like to actually realize that you're not everything anymore.
Well, you know, Dr. Palevsky, I was just actually wanting you to finish your thought because I wanted to speak to that. It's not like even as a mom, so I have 3 children, and it's not like even as a mom, I intentionally set out at the 6 month mark to intentionally make my baby's life a little bit more challenging. If I'm fully within the role of mothering and being with my child on a day-to-day basis, I can see the development, I can see how he or she is evolving. At around the 6 month mark, when they're becoming a lot more agile, a lot more curious, life naturally is asking me to step into my role as a mother and as a caregiver and say, no, honey, you can't go to and put your finger into that outlet. Let's place you over here. Oh, no, honey, you can't put that in your mouth because you might swallow it. It might choke you. So you can't have that. So right. It's like, it's not even looking, you know, reading a book or listening to an authority outside of myself, needing to hear that that's what I need to step into, or that's what I need to introduce to my child or my baby. It's if I'm fully embodied in my role as a mother, as a caregiver, life and our relationship and our interaction will naturally bring that to me, and I will respond very instinctually.
Okay. So now let's take that deeper. because that's purely on the physical world. But let's take it on the spiritual world. How many mothers don't want their kids to feel bad?
Mm-hmm.
When you make that declaration, right? How many mothers and fathers and grandparents will watch a kid not get what he wants and feel bad? That's not building spiritual resilience. Because three things. One, the baby starts out living life very comfortable. And the parents, in doing everything for the kid, don't want to create any discomfort at all. That's part of the lie. Part of the lie is, I'm here for everything. You won't ever feel any discomfort. So when the real world comes, yes, you'll do those physical things because they're naturally instinctual. But on the spiritual level, you may not, because you don't want your kid to have discomfort emotionally or spiritually. Because you will feel badly if your kid cries and doesn't get what she wants. And so here's an example. I saw a family a number of months ago, and the 3-year-old boy and the 1-year-old boy were in the office, and both parents were in there. And the 3-year-old boy wanted to go out of the office. And he starts having a tantrum. I want equals if I don't get, I will die. Because his response was very primitive. It was very hindbrain dominant. If I don't go outside, I'm going to die. And then the tantrum. And the mother, within milliseconds of watching his discomfort, said, "Oh, I have crayons for you." And I looked at her. And again, you know, I'm a New Yorker at heart, so sometimes it really comes out. And I looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" And she, you know, she was taken aback. And so the three things that we must recognize is that comfort exists, discomfort exists, and neither lasts. And when the baby is born, its comfort exists as much as possible. Discomfort must be removed. But the spiritual side of life is comfort exists, discomfort exists, and neither lasts. And that's the transition I'm talking about. So she could not allow him to have any discomfort. And so she was going to medicate with crayons because his feeling discomfort was going to die. She was going to die. Right? So I took over and said to the kid, "Oh, yeah, buddy, I understand. I get it. You really want to go outside. I'm sorry. I need you to stay in with us." And he looked at me like this. Because I used a technique that I will say, Jay, I feel works to build that resilience, which is I acknowledged him. Mm-hmm. So I connected to his heart. I understood him. I recognized him. I saw him. I reached him. I had compassion for him. And then I did what we must do, which is I parented. And I said, "I know, buddy, it's tough. I get it. I know you want to go outside. I need you to stay in the office with us." And so what I watched was the beginning of the emotion of, not the emotion, the beginning of the feeling of discomfort. And then I watched it become the middle of the feeling of it. And then he cried some more. And I said, "I know, buddy, this is tough. I get it. I know you want to play outside, but I need you to stay in here with mom and dad and your brother. Sorry." and thus completed the discomfort because he went on and played. Now, that's not going to happen for every kid, right? But what I did was I gave him the felt experience that discomfort happens, he doesn't die, that it actually shifts. There's a beginning of it, now there's a middle of it, and then with continued acknowledgement in parenting and safety and security, it ends. And so I don't have to tell him discomfort doesn't last. He has a felt experience. Discomfort didn't last, and I didn't die. I'm okay. And life is so good, I have other options. And so that's not possible in an infant, but it's possible in a toddler on. And so we must let our kids feel bad, because the resilience that you're talking about is built into understanding on a felt level that discomfort exists, it doesn't last, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just like comfort doesn't last, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I looked at the mother after this resolved, and I said, let me ask you a question. You're eating your favorite piece of chocolate cake. And so in the beginning of your comfort, you're ecstatic. You got all these endorphins and enzymes and magical chemicals rolling around in your body because you're eating your favorite piece of chocolate cake. And after about 2 bites, I come along and I take your comfort away. How are you going to feel? I'm not going to like it, she said. Okay. But do you know instinctively that by the end of that cake, your comfort's over, knowing that you're not going to have another piece of cake? Now, do you die after your comfort's over? No. You move on, right? Yeah. So comfort doesn't last either. But what if I took your comfort away in the middle? How is that any different than me taking the discomfort away in the middle and not giving you the experience of what happens when something is comfortable in the beginning? By the time you're at your 5th bite, you're not at the same chemistry you were experiencing at your first bite. So comfort is shifting. It's now the middle. And then the comfort ends. And you know, I have a joke my parents used to say when we'd finish something we liked, we'd put the fork down or the spoon and we'd say, wow, that tastes like more. Because we'd want more, right? So the idea to teach resilience is that comfort exists, it doesn't last. Discomfort exists, it doesn't last. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And our job is to move through it and not try to preferentially allow one over the other. That doesn't mean you're dwelling on making more comfort and less discomfort. It just means you have different flow. And so because children don't know the real world after they're born, you can't tell them what the real world is like. You have to allow them to experience it with due parameters. And so, yeah, I don't want my kid playing by an open window. That makes sense, right? But do I want my kid playing where they might get hurt as long as I'm there to help buffer if it happens? Yes. Because we have to allow our children to struggle. And there's a saying I heard in the last couple of months that I think is the crux of what I'm describing and what we want to describe for spiritual resilience. And that is, hard times breed strong men. Strong men create easy times. easy times create weak men. And weak men create difficult times. And so we all know that every parent wants to create a better life for the kid. But by removing some of the important life struggles, you cripple the child's capacity to develop the skills to deal with the struggles. And that means comfort exists, it doesn't last. Discomfort exists, it doesn't last. And you're going to experience the beginning, the middle, and the end to be able to create the resilience and the fortitude to go on in life and deal with greater and greater struggle, to know that you can plod through it. The challenge I see in today's world is that the parents are constantly giving the kids crayons. They're taking away the experience of the struggle. They're answering the questions in the struggle. They're answering for the kids in the struggle. How many times I will work with kids in my office, and I'll say something to the kid, and the parent will say, "Go ahead, tell Dr. Larry." And I'll say something else. "Go ahead, tell Dr. Larry. Answer Dr. Larry. You know the answer, tell Dr. Larry." And I'll eventually turn around to the parent and I'll say, "I speak English, don't I?" Like, you don't need to translate for your kid. Like, "Oh, but I want my kid, I want my kid, I want my kid." No, your kid needs to develop the capacity to create relationship in your presence. But if you're doing it for the kid, you're not building resilience, you're crippling. Because then the kid grows up not knowing if he or she can answer, because then now there's no one there to prompt them to actually answer.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Palevsky, what's really interesting is that part of my own personal spiritual practice has been to go back and rewire that circuit that you're speaking of. And so, sitting in meditation for 10 days in silence, what comes up is a lot of physical discomfort. Like certain times it felt like, I remember the first Vipassana meditation course that I did, it literally felt like my sits bones were on fire. That was a sensation that I was sitting with for hours on end throughout the day. And it was like excruciatingly painful. But at that moment in my life, I was so determined to figure out life. And I felt like that was a piece within the puzzle. And so I sat through it. And after that duration, after that very first course, I came home and I had just, gone through a divorce. I had a 3-year-old child. My home life wasn't so great with my relationship with my parents, but yet I was back there because that was the only way I could have a house over our head for my son and I at that time. And so I remember my mom would come back and try to constantly cocoon my son, who was 3 at the time, from any sort of discomfort, whether it be emotional or physical. And I would constantly say to her, "Mom, sadness, grief, anger, it's all a part of life. I can't constantly deprive him of that, because as human beings, that's what we will experience sooner or later. And if I allow life to naturally speak to him now while supporting him as a mother, as a caregiver, so creating that safety zone that you speak of, he will realize and recognize that this is what life is." And so to this day, my son is 16 now, and my mom and my dad still don't, as grandparents, maybe that's not their role, I don't know, but they still try to protect him. And so for me as a mom, because I had to kind of work through my own stuff, within the spiritual context. I got that on an innate level.
Right.
And I was able to then implement that within how I interacted with him and how I supported him, and now my other two daughters as well.
Great. That's great. And so what you're speaking to is the generations of pendulum swings, right? So what you'll see, and what I have seen over the decades, is parents will behave a certain way to their kids. And when the kids grow up, they'll say, I'm not going to do what my parents did. And then they'll swing all the way to the other side. And so the parents who are overzealous, doting, call them helicopter, I don't know, whatever you want to describe, those who are putting their hands in the back of the kid's neck and moving the kid as if they were marionettes, those are the parents who felt so neglected and so abused or so traumatized that they were going to just do everything for the kid, right? That's the hard times bring strong men. Now the strong men are going to create easy times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the pendulum swing. Now the easy times are going to create weak men. And that's where we are. And it's not just men. It's, I don't want to be, I don't want to isolate men per se, but it's this idea, but we tend to weaken men more than we tend to weaken women, because I think women have more resilience to stay strong more than men have resilience to stay strong under the same stressful conditions. And again, that's biological. I'm not, I don't think I'm saying anything out of the realm of some truth. So we are at a place where we're creating weak men because there's no skills, right? Because everything was so easy. And you see it in the entitlement. You see it in the give me. You see it in the a lot of the teenagers, and even in the 20s, some even in the 30s, where give me, I'm entitled. And there's no motivation, there's no skill set, because so much was done for them. And so now they're like, I don't know how to do anything other than look it up. And that's where we're creating more difficult times, because we have a generation or two that just doesn't have the skill set. Mm-hmm. Because the discomfort was taken away, and the ability to cope with discomfort was taken away. So what do you have? You have parents who are hiring people to write essays for their children to go to college. And you have parents who are calling guidance counselors and professors to advocate for their kids. That's unheard of in my generation. Like, we were embarrassed if our parents did anything, related to college. Like, go away. All right, you dropped me off, go home, right? So, and it's not as if they didn't care. It's just that we knew enough to go through struggles and come out better on top. But, when you give crayons all the time, you're going to create humans who have no skill set. And then what happens is you have a creation of a brain chemistry that wants comfort all the time, because the discomfort was never integrated into the chemistry. So now you see the addictions, the habits, the tantrums, the reactivity, the depression, the anxiety, because the skill set isn't there, right? Because there's no curiosity to be able to look at this discomfort and go, God, I wonder what this is, or how am I going to get through this? Because the parents never gave the kids the option to go through this, because they were either answering for them or making phone calls for them or hiring somebody for them or giving them crayons all the time.
Yeah. We were just out, we're out here on Vancouver Island near Victoria, and we were in town yesterday, and we were taking this little water taxi across, and the person that was taking us was showing us these big sailing ships that were on the side. And he said, "You know what those are?" He goes, "It's a program that they run where they actually take teams out for anywhere from minimum of 2 weeks to 4 weeks to longer. And they take them out on these basically these sailing treks where they're totally have to work as a group. They have to do everything together. They're really in charge of making everything work. They kind of teach them the basics of sailing and stuff, but the whole idea was that it basically had to put it into their hands to go through discomfort, figure out solutions around it, see that they could come out the other side of it." And he was saying he was an old teacher, and he said that he met one of his old students that had done that, and he said that that type of experience was life changing. But it's almost like they need to. It's like at this point, it's almost like having to create a situation where you have to go to learn those skills because they haven't been developed so well throughout just regular upbringing.
Right, because we've created easy times.
Well, and
Now, as parents, you want your kids to have an easier time than you did, but you run the risk of potentially crippling them. Right? I mean, I've heard stories of families where children never really knew how wealthy the parents were because they were made to live a life of balance. You're not going to get everything you want, right? I'm not going to pay for everything. You're going to have to work to get things, right? You're going to have to work to figure it out. I mean, when children ask me questions in the office, I can't tell you how fast the parents want to answer for them. Like, what are you doing? Well, I don't want my kid to get it wrong, or I don't want my kid to look bad. Who's judging you? Nobody's judging you, right? So when a kid asks me a question, you know what I do? I throw it back. I say, well, what do you think? And the reason I do that, and this is another step I feel in building spiritual resilience, when we answer for kids and we give them what we want, and we take away their struggle, we are essentially making them see the world through our eyes. But if we can stop for one moment to understand who those children are at that stage of development in their lives, through their eyes, we build their resilience. Because if a 3-year-old brings my stethoscope to me and says, "Dr. Larry, what's this?" And I turn around and I say to him, "I don't know, what do you think it is?" I'll never know what his creative mind thinks it is. If the parent or anyone else dumps the answer into him, then he'll only see the world through that adult's eyes. But I'll never know how he sees the world.
Yeah,
and so
that captures it really beautifully. Sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
So when the 3-year-old says to me, "Oh, Dr. Larry, it's a stethoscope," I would never have known that he knew. And I would never have truly understood the reason he asked me the question in the first place. Because in my experience, children rarely ask a question because they want you to give them an answer. Rarely. The majority of the time, the children ask a question is because they just want to connect. They don't want attention. They want you to connect. They want their hearts to reach your heart. And so it was brilliant for me to realize that when he said stethoscope, he just wanted to connect to me. And so it gave me the impetus to really never answer a kid's question. And I don't. And so another kid once said to me, "Dr. Larry, what's this?" And it was my stethoscope, similar age. And I said, "I don't know. What do you think it is?" And he said, "A heart listener."
Mhm.
It's like, wow, right? You never get to experience the creativity of a young child because you're being didactic, or you're being correct, or you're being mental. When a 3-year-old doesn't care about mental, the 3-year-old cares about seeing the world through a 3-year-old's eyes, which is one of magic and story, but not one of concepts and facts. And so when you see a 3-year-old, why do we want to download our world into the 3-year-old and make the child see the world through our eyes? Why not reestablish a connection in ourselves to that phase of the child's development that we never lost, but we have disconnected from, which is the world of creativity, imagination, and wonder. Mm-hmm. And so one time I was in my office behind the front desk, and a mother and father had come in with their maybe 11-month-old, 13-month-old, I wasn't sure. And the kid was sitting on the mother's lap in the waiting area. He was seeing another practitioner, not me. And there are kids playing there, and this was what the mother was doing. Car, toy, book, boy, chair, crayon. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. But if you actually looked at the kid wasn't paying any attention to the mother. The kid was paying attention to what was going on in the waiting area. And the mother was completely disconnected from the kid because she saw the world through her eyes and wanted to dump it onto the kid. And, you know, someone's going to write in and say, oh, but we have to teach our kids. No, we don't. Because kids learn by experiencing much more than they learn by you telling them what to do. So then she went to the bathroom. She put the kid in the dad's lap, and the chairs were up against the banister of the ramp that came up and down from the bathroom. So the father is sitting in the chair, the kid is facing this way, and the mother comes out of the bathroom behind the kid and then starts narrating the room again. Toy, car, truck, crayon, boy, pen. And I thought, wow, we've really sunk to new lows. So again, thankfully, the kid at that age doesn't absorb too much of that in that moment. But you can imagine what the rest of the moments must be with the mother dumping her world into the kid, rather than looking at the kid and wondering, what does the kid see? Right? Because a toddler or even a 3-year-old is not interested in the name of the thing that they're playing with. They're interested in just exploring it and experiencing it and learning it, but not naming it. They don't care. And the world that we dump into them is way, way out of proportion to what their capacity is in their brain and their hearts to absorb. And so, again, we have to be able to begin looking at the world through the children's eyes again and not dump it onto them the way we see it, with this fear that we ought to get them into Harvard by 5.
Well, that's part of what I think is part of the problem, though. It's like the child doesn't really care too much. And I see this with our kids in a lot of ways too, but where they just want to play with stuff. They're curious about things, but it's almost like for the parents, for them to know, quote unquote, know certain things or know names of things is sort of a metric for them to decide where their child is and what, do they know their numbers? Do they know their, like all of those types of things? Are they smart enough? And they compare them to what other kids know. That's where they get all wrapped up in it. So, And part of it, like you were saying earlier, it's like for the child's ability to be able to stay with sensation, like we were talking about, I mean, it's directly proportional to the ability for the parent to stay with sensation. And so much of the time, the parent is getting either overwhelmed with either impatience or guilt or shame or any of these different things because they're not comfortable to stay with sensation, or they're so stressed that they can't even get into the prefrontal cortex part to be able to think differently. So they don't have the kind of capacity to stay with sensation. And then it keeps this cycle going. So like what you're talking about is so important. And it really has to come back to it, because a lot of times parents are going to be like, that makes sense, but they're not going to be able to do it because they're not in a place to be able to actually do it, even if they intellectually make sense to them.
No. And that's why the spiritual resilience has to come from the adult, because you will cripple the child if you take away their experience of the world. Many years ago, I was walking in New York City, and this 2-year-old boy was standing on the sidewalk looking up at this really, really tall guy who was doing the duck voice.
That's pretty good.
Well, he was great. Like I suck compared to what he was doing. And so what you watched was this 2-year-old in typical 2-year-old fashion. What is 2-year-old fashion? Awe, wonder, observation, discovery, fascination. Just like taking it in. And that's what the kid was. It was just like this. I captured it. I'll tell you, here we are in 2021. I can tell you it was about 10 years ago. I captured it in my body because I was so mesmerized by how mesmerized the boy was. And alongside him was the mother. And this is what the mother was doing. You like it? It's fun, isn't it? He's good. Don't you think he's good? You like what he's doing? And she's just narrating it. Completely disconnected from the boy and disconnected from her own experience of the fascination of what he's doing. But she had to teach him and tell him what was going on and what he should feel. And thankfully, a 2-year-old being 2 stayed right there. Just didn't even look at the mother. Just mesmerized. I can only hope that the kid continued to do that because the mother just wasn't connected. And that's the anxiety that you're talking about, Jay. The need to sort of do something with the experience rather than to just have the experience. I liken it to the generation of people who are going on tours or walking in new places. And instead of going on tours and walking on new places,
yeah, that's exactly the picture I got too.
So they're behind the camera. They're not experiencing it. Like, just like this mother, she wasn't experiencing it. She wasn't experiencing him. She wasn't experiencing the guy, and she wasn't experiencing herself or her ability to be in awe of her child's response.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what I mean by these are stages that are still present in our beings that we disconnect from. Like just this, wow. Whoo.
It's that pre-verbal stage before the words and the intellect kick in. And it's what that episode where Laszlo was speaking about the spiritual experience and how important it is for all of us to have that spiritual experience throughout our life.
And so I'll take it one step further. I talked about the hindbrain, and I think I talked about it in our first meeting. The hindbrain is where the dominance of brain existence is when babies are born. That's the I want equals I get or I die. But when the brain functionally develops without being hindered by toxic injections and other outside influences, the pathways of brain development go forward. And so they go forward so as to build an emotional brain, which is the midbrain, an experiential brain, which is a midbrain. And then after experience after experience after experience, where the hindbrain activity actually builds a midbrain experience, the forebrain then comes to its own conclusion, its own understanding, and its own ownership of what's true. And so what parents are doing is they're filling the forebrain from the outside without allowing the forebrain to develop from the inside, because they're taking away the experiences, because they don't want their kids to experience, or they don't want their kids to struggle. And so what's left is this lack of motivation, which comes from doing something, which is initiated in the hindbrain, which then leaves you with a lack of midbrain development. So you don't have an experience, you don't have an emotional response because you didn't do it yourself. And we're stunting the brain development. So we're loading this forebrain with lots of junk. And then those people who are loaded that way mostly speak of their expertise because of what they were loaded with, but not because of what they went through, the hindbrain action, the midbrain experience, the toiling, the trial and error, in order to come to a conclusion, which then gives their forebrain their thought and their knowledge and their understanding and their ownership, which is why we're in such a drastic state in the world today, because most people know things because it was just downloaded into their forebrain, but not because they have ownership of their own research or their own critical thinking.
Yeah, well said. That's what I was thinking, was that you can't really critically think. It's sort of like the brain not being anchored in the heart. You know, it's like you need to have these things connected, so there's a feeling sense connected to what you're intellectually bringing in, and let these things work together. Otherwise, the substance isn't there. There's nothing to anchor it.
Right. About 25 years ago, when I was running a pediatric intensive care unit in the city in a hospital, and I had to cover the emergency room, I remember seeing a father with his 3-year-old son in the ER. And the 3-year-old was playing, and all of a sudden he fell and hit the floor. And the father sat there and looked at him. And the kid looked up at the father. The father looked at him and assessed him, nodded. The kid stood up and went back and played. And I thought, now I'm all of 35 years old at this time, right? And I looked at the father inside and I said to myself, oh, good for you. Because you gave the kid the experience. You gave the kid your safety in the experience. You assessed the experience, and you allowed the child to figure out what to do next. And because you didn't get hysterical and run and pick up the kid and oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you actually allowed the child to go, oh, I had a little discomfort. Okay, it's over. All right, I can move on. And it was just brilliant to watch this man do this. And I was really impressed. I was impressed because I inherently knew that that's what was needed in the situation. But to watch it, I thought, this is brilliant. And around the same time, I would give lectures to parent groups. And yeah, I'm in my mid to late 30s, and I'm giving lectures on positive ways to say no. And this mother raised her hand and said, my 2-year-old, whenever I say no, goes like this. No, 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 no. And, you know, I'm a New Yorker, so I respond in kind. And I said, good for her. And of course, she was a little taken aback. Kids learn by modeling. They don't learn by you telling them what to do. And nowadays, when I say that to parents, I then look at them and I say, okay, you and your spouse are having an argument. You're yelling. Your spouse comes over to you and says, stop yelling. What do? And of course, they laugh a little bit and giggle, say, well, I'll yell louder and I'll yell more. I said, so you gave a command. Your spouse gave you a command. You didn't listen. Why not? I said, so when you give a command to your child like that, why is your child going to listen? And so then you start opening the door to going back to the way I described language before with the kid with the crayon, which is to be able to acknowledge and then parent. So I say, what if your spouse looked at you and said, wow, honey, I can see you're really mad here, but I can't listen to you if you're yelling at me. And you could see the body change in the spouse who that's said to. There's a relaxation, like, oh, you acknowledged me. And so really, this is what's needed in relationship, is to be able to acknowledge and also be able to say what it is that you're capable of in that relationship. Instead of just agree that whatever the other person is doing is either good or bad. Right? So we have to unmerge from the other person, which is what the parents need to do with the kids, unmerge, see them as separate, and try to see the world through what they must be going through. So a child who's screaming and you tell stop screaming, ha ha ha, they're going to scream, right? Because kids don't listen to demands. But if you say to the kid, I can't listen to you if you're yelling, then you're creating a relational dynamic instead of a steep hierarchical dynamic. And you're actually able to say, you're a person, you're screaming, you got something going on. But I'm a person here, and I'm not going to ignore my person. And so if you need to scream, that's fine. But I, as a person with you, I have a reaction to it. And my reaction is, I can't be with you if you're going to scream. So your choice. I'll listen to you if you stop screaming. But I can't listen to you if you scream. And this is the pendulum swing back to the middle. Right? Because what you also see a lot, at least I see, is parents asking permission to be parents. Right? Put your coat on, okay? Like, okay, what? It's 0 degrees Celsius out there. There's no choice here. Mm-hmm. I need you to put your coat on. I'm leaving. Oh, that works. Or here's your coat. I'm leaving. Right? So that you create a dynamic of two people in relationship. That's how you build the spiritual resilience, because you're not pounding on the kid all these demands. And you're also not saying, can I be your parent, please? right? It's time to go to bed, okay? Please brush your teeth, all right? Oh, I need you to brush your teeth. It's time to go to bed. Right? That relational language of I need or I want or it's time, where you're actually creating the middle of the pendulum. You know, the Goldilocks, mama bear, papa bear, just right baby bear, where we're developing different relationships so that we can really build the voices and the spirits and the power of the children in the confines of the parental structure. But that requires the adults to do a lot of work.
Mhm.
So that's how we need to build the spiritual resilience,
Mhm.
is we need to start working with the parents who can feel their discomfort and who can start looking at the world through the child's eyes and who can reincorporate their own wonder and awe and fascination with the world, and who can build the relationship with another person and allow experiences, discomfort and comfort and discomfort and comfort to meld together in the waves of life. Mm-hmm. So that you can build a fortitude of resilience. Because taking comfort away does what? Create a traumatized child. Taking discomfort away creates a crippled child with a lot of other trauma as well. Mm-hmm. And so you can't have just the top of a muffin anymore. You gotta have the top and the bottom. We need both. We need to be able to integrate both into the lives of our children so that we build the spiritual resilience. And so they develop the fortitude, because we know that they won't need us for the rest of their lives unless we really want to torture them by making them have to need us, in which case we're going to cripple them and traumatize them. Yeah. And so it's really important that we build them to have both comfort and discomfort, not one or the other. But this is truly yin yang. This is comfort, discomfort as one, not comfort or discomfort. It's comfort, discomfort. They're one. They're one and the same. You can't separate one from the other. And if you do, you're lying. Mm-hmm. Because neither one lasts and neither one is preferenced over the other.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of the whole pleasure-pain cycle and the importance of the necessity of both of them. And they have to kind of move from one to the other.
It makes me think of Rumi's quote. I pulled it up. If you're irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And you know, if we just to go to the trauma side of things, if we look at all of the deeper aspects of trauma and addictions, the basic underlying problem or issue, not problem, is lack of connection. It's the pain of lack of connection. And so everything that I've been talking about today is about creating connection. And you can't create connection if you want the child to see the world through your eyes. And if you want to remove 50% of life's experience, and if you want to dump the truth and the facts of the world into them without giving them the opportunity to figure it out.
You know, Dr. Palevsky, this will segue into another conversation I think we'll have to have at another point, but because what I see with that is when I talk to patients, a lot of times I've found the parents are able to be more in that place and see life through the child's eyes when they're not so busy, time restrained, on the treadmill, stressed, all of these types of things. They're, you know, it's like even initially with everything that started with COVID, I had a lot of patients where their family life improved dramatically when they were not at work and they were off this sort of treadmill. They kind of realized, and they could actually be there. And, you know, it's like when you were talking about when the child's asking lots of questions, they just want to connect. I mean, how many times as parents, when your child's going on asking question after question, do parents get to the point where it's like, enough, here's the answer, like stop asking questions, like I don't have time to do it. It's like they're impatient. There's 100 other things going on. So it makes me think like this is part of these, it's part of these changes that I think are inevitable, that are going to start to make, they're going to start to take place if we are wanting to live our lives in a certain way and create an environment for our kids. It's starting to look at what just big picture needs to start to change. What do we need to create? How does it need to be different? Because if what is currently going on is not allowing a space for that to take place, and if that's something that you really wholeheartedly want to start to create with your kids, but it can't happen in the current way that your life is rolling,
Well, right.
then
Right.
there's going to have to be some things that are going to change. And
I'll give an introduction to that. I'll give an introduction to that. Because look, there's no doubt that we live in a time where parents are holding on to their kids much more strongly than ever. And so the fear that parents have for their children is literally making them merge with their children, forcing their children to be them. And so the work is to actually begin to unmerge the parents from the children and unhook them from their fears and give breath, B-R-E-A-T-H and B-R-E-A-D-T-H, to the spaces between them so that they start to do their own work and then realize that their children are on their own spiritual paths. Mm-hmm. And that our job is not to form their path. Our job is to guide their path. And so most of what I say to parents is, you're working too hard. You're just doing too much, because your child doesn't require you to be everything. Your child just needs you to be good enough, because the rest your child will take on his or her own and run with, if given the opportunity.
Yeah. Stay tuned for part 2.
Yeah, because I also want to dive a little bit further back now, backtrack. And as far as the first 6 months, what if, you know, safety and security were not achieved? Because I feel like in a lot of ways, how society has been structured has been flipped, where we actually are trying to appease our kids later on, but then the protocols or the habits or the acceptable societal norms that we have in place really early on go against that heart-to-heart connection with our babies. Whereas, you know, if we're speaking of crying it out methods and sleeping in separate rooms, and like none of that has ever felt right for me. But you read books and you go to government community offered programs, and it's all about ways in which you can start your children off right by, you know, crying it out.
Right. So that's a subject I can speak on for about an hour on its own, but I'll just throw a little bit in there before we end. You cannot spoil a baby. You can spoil a toddler, but you cannot spoil a baby. A baby is helpless. A baby needs you to be everything. It's at the point where the baby doesn't need you to be everything that the shift starts to happen, where you're able to discern where and how a baby needs something or doesn't. I think the crying out method is as close to child abuse as you could possibly get. Mm-hmm. because of several things. One, the baby doesn't know object permanence.
Mhm.
If one of you were to go to the other room, you would both know that each of you still exists in the world, even if you don't smell, see, taste, touch, or hear each other. That's called object permanence. You don't have the physical senses of the person, but you know that the other person is in the other room. Babies don't have object permanence. Let me say that again. Babies don't have object permanence. If you're not there, they do not know you're there at all. They don't know you exist. They don't know you can be seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. And so to tell a parent to let a baby cry it out is completely ignoring child development, completely ignoring the spiritual development, and completely ignoring what children need at that age. And so remember, babies need connection. They need some form of sight, touch, hearing, smelling, tasting to be connected to and to be reassured. Now we can talk about how to do that, when the baby is crying, if the baby does sleep in another room. But ultimately, babies need to be acknowledged, bonded to, and connected to. That's my ABC: acknowledge, bond, connect. As we get older, we still need acknowledge, bonding, and connecting. But hopefully there's more object permanence to understand that it's not so emergent, but can still happen. And so, again, this to me is child abuse. This is horrible neglect to leave a child crying in another room. And I'll look at a parent and I'll say, let me ask you a question. You're uncomfortable. Something's wrong. You're upset. And you start crying. And you're in a room all by yourself. And all of your loved ones are somewhere in the house. And they all hear you. But no one comes to see what's going on. How do you feel? And I'm done. Because this idea of, well, they have to learn to soothe themselves is abusive.
Mhm.
Because soothing is not what occurs. It's resignation and helplessness that dives deep down into letting go, just collapsing. So yeah, the kid will fall asleep because at some point the kid realizes, I'm done. I'm done. There's no one here for me.
Dr. Palevsky, you can actually hear it in the cry, in the change in the tone of the cry of the baby when it comes to that.
Right. And so just to dovetail something, when I hear parents say to their crying baby, it's okay, I shake. And the reason I shake is because you're still not connecting to your kid. So I look at the parent and I say, let me ask you a question. If you were crying and someone came up to you and said, it's okay, what would you do? And you know what their answer is? I get angry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what are you doing to your kid? Oh, but I don't want them to feel bad. Great. Okay. Connect to them. I know, sweetie, I know you're upset. I got you. I'm here. I'm touching you. I'm holding you. I'll kiss you. I'll pick you up. I'll feed you. I'll change you. I'm with you. Language of connection. Acknowledge, bond, connect. Acknowledge, bond, connect. Mm-hmm. It soothes the heart every moment. Right? Today I was in the office seeing a colleague of mine's grandchildren, and the 18-month-old granddaughter was crying. And I looked at her and I said, I know, you're really upset. She turned around, looked at me. Stop crying. Right? What did I do? I connected. I understood her. Right? What am I going to do? I don't know what's wrong. And so when a parent looks at an 18-month-old and said, what's the matter? I mean, what are you being conceptual with an 18-month-old for? Doesn't matter what's the matter. Your child needs you to connect. And so these are the things that I like teaching, that I want to keep teaching, that need to be expanded on in greater detail about how to move through these steps. Because we're not here anymore. Stop it. Go away. Sit down. And we're not here anymore. Can you put your coat on, please? Can I be your parent? We're not there. Because neither works. Mm-hmm. What works is a little of each. Right? I acknowledge you. I connect to you. I understand you. I hear you. I see you. I'm with you. And I'm parenting you. I know you want to go to the party with your friends. I'm not giving you the car keys to go. Let's find another way. Oh, I hate you. You're ruining my social life. Yes, you're correct. I am ruining your social life. Now, how can we get you to the party without me giving you the keys to the car? Mm-hmm. Oh, you don't trust me. Okay, fine. It's not you I don't trust, it's others on the road I don't trust at that hour. Oh, you know I'll be good. Yeah, I know. I'll drive you a block away. Everyone's gonna see you. Your choice, right? That's parenting. Mm-hmm. That's parenting, right?
Yeah. It's
I can hear some people say like, well, I turned out fine and my parents let me cry it out. And I always think, well, is that why then as adults, we spend a lifetime trying to fix ourselves up and going to counseling sessions and going to all these retreats to figure out why we're so screwed up?
Well, and what does fine even mean, right?
Yeah, that's it. I don't think we all connect to what those circumstances meant for our physiology and how those physiologies manifest in our day-to-day world today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's only when you do the inner work that you start to realize, oh, that's why I do that. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the first impression is, well, I'm fine. That's not me. I'm good. And, as human as we are, that's rarely the case, right? Because, that bold statement is often a sign of, let's pick up that rock because there's something under there that needs to be looked at.
Yeah. And I think from a parent standpoint, it's like, and this isn't to get on any parent's background stuff, it's just to bring awareness. Tay and I are well aware of a lot of this stuff. We've investigated this and we've worked with this for a long time. And we still say some of the same things that we know aren't necessarily benefit. Like they just sort of come out sometimes. There's a lot of conditioning back there, like generational conditioning. So it's not always an easy thing, but I think it's just have this open sort of honest relationship with ourselves, with what happens. And don't get on your back too much about it. It's like, it's a work in progress, but I think if we're aware of it, we just keep doing the best we can with it. So,
and I will say, just to dovetail on that, The only reason that I could say the things that I've just said in the last hour plus is because I struggled not being able to do all these things, not having had the kind of childhood experience that would have brought me those results. So it's from struggle. It's from tremendous inner struggle, and realize, what things I had to go through and still have to go through to stay in that middle pendulum, so that I'm not all one way or all the other way. It's a constant dynamic process that requires an amazing awareness and an ability to be conscious about what you went through and what you carry and what you want to be able to heal, so that you can raise your level of consciousness and really master the growth and development of amazing spiritual beings who we bring into the world to be our children.
Dr. Palevsky, that was wonderful. What a great chance to get to chat with you again with all this. And I know we'll be contacting you again to go into more details. Like it's endless how much stuff is going on. And I think what new information is going to be necessary for moving forward. So thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. Where can people learn more about the work you're doing?
So I have a website, Dr. Palevsky, Dr. Palevsky, Palevsky.com. You can also find it at northportwellnesscenter.com. I have an Instagram channel, Dr. Palevsky, Palevsky. I have a Telegram channel, I think it's Lawrence Palevsky or Dr. Lawrence Palevsky. I have MeWe channel, I have Rumble and all Odyssey and BitChute, and I don't even know what else. I have a link tree on my Instagram account that people can read. I have newsletters, interviews. I do a weekly webinar with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny called Critically Thinking with Dr. T and Dr. P. Those are archived in my newsletters and in my website. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
We'll make sure.
Yeah, we'll have all those links noted at the bottom of this video as well for viewers.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Dr. Palevsky, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. That was wonderful. I appreciate the time.